Hello and welcome to another edition of Get Outside St. Tammany. I'm your host, Davis Brister. This is, of course, a show dedicated to all things outdoors in St. Tammany Parish. And what better thing to do than actually go outdoors for this episode? We are at the beautiful Fontainebleau State Park where we will conduct this month's episode. And we're back now with Craig Gautreaux, who is also from the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. And you have a unique thing to talk about today. First of all, tell us what your job is with the department, and we'll get into some of the fun stuff you brought to talk about.
I'm a biologist program manager in the Office of Fisheries in the Department of Research and Development.
Gotcha.
It's a new department or section that's as part of our reorg, but we kind of encompass a lot of different things, including artificial reef monitoring and the use of different technologies. And so today we'll be talking about telemetry for fish.
Telemetry is a hard word to say. It took me 5 minutes to say it correctly. Tell us exactly what that is.
So telemetry is a very general term for measuring things from afar. And so there's different applications of it. Specifically what we're talking about today is acoustic telemetry. And so that's using sound waves to measure the presence or absence of fish. And then these tags or transmitters are actually very high tech and can provide you with additional information over time.
And there's a bunch of different ways to do this? Is
Correct.
that correct?
Yes, sir.
Get into some of that for us.
In Lake Pontchartrain, we're using acoustic telemetry, and so that's the use of a receiver, which is essentially a hydrophone, so it's listening, and then these tags, which are surgically implanted into fish. And so anytime a fish with a tag comes within about a half a mile of these receivers, we can pick it up. And so we're able to see how the different species are utilizing the various habitats of the lake.
What do you, when you get that information, what does it tell you? I know that's probably an answer that would take 2 hours, but in very short form, what do you learn from that?
An incredible amount of information. It's very, I mean, there's a lot of data points, and so you have to come back and analyze it. Over the course of the Lake Pontchartrain study, we've tagged spotted sea trout, red drum, and bull sharks, and then U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has tagged Gulf sturgeon in the Pearl River system, which we've also detected in our array. So the acoustic array is great because it's basically this network that's constantly listening for fish that are tagged by different researchers. And so it's a great tool that kind of adds to the toolbox, and it really gives you a picture of how fish utilize different habitats, and then also what are some of the seasonal migration patterns. And so the ability to repeatedly measure the same individual fish provides you with this kind of life story of a fish.
Is it used in Louisiana the same way it's used in any other state, or is Louisiana, there more specifics to this area?
Louisiana's on the kind of the forefront of, it's a fairly novel technology.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, the sonar, it was developed from sonar from World War II, and initially it was used to kind of monitor whether salmon are moving past dams in the West Coast. And so it's slowly being incorporated in the Gulf area. The research started in Bayou St. John by some UNO researchers, where they were tagging red drum to see if they would escape through the locks, and they actually saw some get out. They also did some work on spotted sea trout in Calcasieu Lake with some LSU researchers, and they saw that there was some difference in the seasonal movement patterns of the males and females. And so we kind of expanded the array to this beautiful large Lake Pontchartrain, and we were able to identify some very key environmental factors that drive movement, but then also see with their response of opening the Bonnet-Carré spillway, for instance. So when you have a large environmental disturbance, how do the fish respond to that?
You've already touched on some of the valuableness of this. Is there one aspect of it more valuable than the others, or what's the most valuable aspects of using these tools?
To me, it's the collaborative nature of it. And so you can get multiple researchers working together, tagging different species to kind of meet this kind of holistic goal. And so the applications and the work together with us and Fish and Wildlife Service and academia, as well as other researchers in other states. So if you have fish like bull shark, for instance, we know that they use Lake Pontchartrain as a nursery, but we also picked one up that left the lake last fall and winter and was detected in Florida. And so these things travel great distances, and so you wouldn't know that unless it was tagged with these acoustic tags.
You have one visual for us. What's behind you there?
These are the different states of the tags, and so they come like this, nice, clean, and black. Of course, there's fouling that goes on in the water, so we paint it with a kind of anti-fouling paint. But over time, barnacles, we have to scrape them off, and so we routinely download these receivers. And so we try to mount them on pilings or PVC in shallower water or where possible. But in the deeper water of the lakes, many of you might have seen this yellow buoy. And so hanging underneath the rope is one of these receivers that's listening for fish swimming by it. And so
so the way to get those into the water is essentially the buoy. Or are there other ways?
For the deeper water, yeah. For some of our artificial reef habitats, some of the deep holes along the causeway, our receivers are mounted to these buoys as just a way to kind of leave it out there. And so we routinely go out and download the data, and it takes a little while to process all that information, but it starts to kind of illustrate kind of the life story of a fish.
Awesome. What are some of the future applications of acoustic telemetry?
I mean, it's great. As the technology expands, the materials or the tags themselves start getting smaller and cheaper, and then it's a great monitoring tool to tell you information about the changes. And so with the Bonacary spillway, when it opened last winter, we saw that the fish didn't necessarily leave the lake altogether. They kind of hugged the perimeter where it was just a little bit saltier. And so this kind of lends itself to the diversions that are coming online, and so this could be a potentially a great tool to kind of see the changes and the difference of fish movement by species. And so it definitely has a great application, but it's just a matter of kind of finding the right mechanism to implement it.
Good. And anything else you want to add?
Just want to say that it has been a pleasure to be on the show and visit the beautiful Fontainebleau Park, and the public is able to view this information and see the fish tracks at louisianafisheries.net. There's a telemetry map, and you can watch the fish kind of move around, some of the past data.
Is it real time, or do you have to update it?
We have to update it. It takes a while, and so it's just a way to, as some of the data is being analyzed and processed and written up in reports, this is a way to kind of give back to the public so that they can see how these fish move and start coming up with their own theories.
I'm sure you've got a lot of people that are interested in that kind of thing around here.
Absolutely, and one of the early results from the LSU study on spotted sea trout was that salinity was a major driver of fish movement. And so one increase in part per thousand is like a 10 times increase that the trout will be there. So as it gets in fall and the water starts getting saltier, that's the home run trout, or the World Series trout. And so they start coming in the fall when it gets saltier, when the temperatures start cooling, and that's the same time that the bull sharks are leaving the lake. And then as the trout start leaving in the fall and the early summer, when it's getting a little too fresh and a little too hot, the bull sharks start coming in and utilizing the nursery habitat. So it's really fascinating to see how all the different species operate in this great ecological system.
Most definitely. Craig Gautreaux, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.